What's up, everybody? Welcome to Dope Synergies, episode 4. It's crazy we've come along. I am Gladia, got my life partner,
Stephanie.
Steph. And we left off last week talking about the 3 months we were in we called it the honeymoon phase. And we left off on the really big pivotal moment that I feel like transcended our relationship a little bit, which was adding Alex to the mix. So we're going to talk a lot about what that's been, especially for me, somebody who's never had a kid, or I've worked with kids, but actually having a kid 24/7 is totally different. And the theme for today is change, embracing change. And I think that can be really difficult, especially for people in a relationship, let alone with kids. So we're going to uncover that a little bit today.
Yes. So I think where we left off was Alex came back, right?
Yeah, and I think the lead up to that, we had gone to PR, Puerto Rico.
Right.
And things got I feel like it was a blur after that, because that was such an amazing trip. We went to Miami, and that's where being out there, we're like, we can see ourselves living here. And then being so close to PR. So that was a magical trip.
It really was.
And I think we were telling ourselves too, you're like, I'm embracing this because when we go back home,
I knew as a mom. Now she knows what I'm talking about, but I was like soaking it all in. I was very present in the moment, and you don't have the distractions. And I love my son to death. I mean, I love Alex, and it's Mother's Day today too. So shout out to all the moms.
How could I not? It's like, well, we already celebrated the Mexican Mother's Day, but happy Mother's Day, Bill. I love you.
Yes, I love you. We did celebrate Friday though, because it's Mexican Mother's Day. So I don't even celebrate Sundays. But yes, shout out to all the mothers out there. I feel your pain. It's a love-hate relationship with being a parent, but it's a very humbling experience too, because it teaches you a lot of things like patience and things like that. But back to the trip. So it was a very magical trip. One of my friends who lives out in Puerto Rico gave us such a dope experience, and I was just soaking it all in and telling her, "Hey, Alex is coming back when we get back, so shit's about to get real. Going from real." This would be a cool reel too. Because I knew what was coming. She had an idea, she said she's worked with kids before, but it's not the same working with kids and giving them an agenda and being an authority
figure, and handing them off
at some point, right? But I knew what we were walking into, especially being in a relationship. I hadn't been in a relationship since I divorced his dad, which was years ago. I mean, he was like 4 years old at the time, or 3.5. And so he's never really had a father or mother figure. It's just been me. And it was much easier for me to do that as well. I talked about having commitment issues. I think one of the issues or fears that I had was what that whole dynamic would look like, right? Just the thought of like having to deal. I'm already dealing with my son and, making sure he's good. Having somebody else in the picture is just a whole different dynamic, which I wasn't ready for. But with her, I was ready for it, but I knew what was coming as well. And I knew that at the end of the day, I was committed, right? So I keep telling myself that as the days get, closer to all of us being together. And we were we came back to Miami and then went back home.
And it was a lot happening.
It was.
We had, because if you guys recall from the last episode, we were living out of Airbnbs essentially
for a while, until
for a couple months
where we were going to go.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy actually. Before PR, I literally packed all of our stuff.
Right.
And the plan was we were going to come back from PR because we couldn't live out of a room with a child.
Last episode too, we talked about her getting laid off, roommate, getting laid off as well.
And then moving together.
So that was a lot. And all that happened between the time that Alex wasn't here. So we had no clue. He's coming back also to a different environment. And that was like the scariest part for me, because I'm like, how is he going to react? Now we have somebody else who's part of the family, and we're moving, by the way.
Right. Yeah, because you guys were living with your mom at the time. And so we found an Airbnb in Long Beach. And so the plan was, because we already had all our stuff packed, we got back from PR and it was like new world, new environment, new everything. So even for me, who's been like the last couple months have been new environments, like it was just, I don't think I really synced in the reality of
Mm-hmm.
it all because we were keeping ourselves busy. And that's something we talked about too
Yeah.
before a lot in the last episode is like, you don't really want to face reality in terms of your job or like, having to find a job or like what your financial outcome will be, and then also like adjusting to bringing on a child into our household, which she's been used to, but it was a whole different dynamic so all three of us were
And I
accustomed
think
to it.
even for you being alone to then now having two people, not just a kid,
Right,
right?
exactly.
It's just having a whole new dynamic. And same for me. I wasn't alone, I had Alex, but technically I called the shots on my own. And now being in a partnership, being in a, family environment, we are a team, right? And so we need to create like rules and boundaries and standards and all these things that I had no idea like how to even go through that. I had a very hard time communicating, but I think you meet Alex, and then Alex hits it off well with her, so that kind of gave me a lot of comfort in knowing that he liked her. He did ask a couple questions, like was it. It's new for kids, I think. Raising two moms raising a child, especially a boy. But kids know, right? Like, so he did ask me a couple questions, like, isn't it supposed to be a girl and a guy? Or he also asked you a couple questions too, I remember.
I think the way I look or something, but
yeah. But we try to normalize it as much as we could. And so my main fear was, what if he, like, I don't know, judges me or isn't okay with this? But kids don't know any different. I think it's a matter of like how you explain it to them and how you just normalize it. Because at the end of the day, it is normal. Like, there's nothing wrong with us. We just are two women who love each other and want to be better with each other and live life together. It's no different than a man or a woman, because I've been down that path too. So it's not much of a difference. The difference is how healed are you in your journey to want to be committed to somebody and just want to be better for yourself and your kids. And so I told myself, let's normalize this and just make it super simple for him. And so I think he acclimated pretty well to us being together. It took some time in many different ways, but
I don't think it was even us like being together. I think it was just a whole new environment for him, like not being, near your family or anything like that. And it's not like he received that kind of support anyways. It was just a person.
And I don't have like a big family either, and it's not like super supportive. That's a whole other topic too, right? Which we'll get into.
That would be another episode.
Yeah, because I'll probably leave that for the next episode. But for this one, I mean, the main thing was change. And so it was change of environment when Alex got back, change of our living settings, right? Like, we're so used to having our own environment. So combining the two. And then I'm looking at the calendar, I'm also thinking, well, it was about a month in, or not even. He came back and we were already planning to like.
Yeah, because we came back in August. Yeah, we got back from PR in August, early August. And so we literally picked up Alex maybe a couple days after we got back from that trip. We got acclimated to the new Airbnb, which is a whole other story.
Right.
In Long Beach. It wasn't necessarily like, it was sort of the hood. It was a hood, we would say. So I've, for the most part, I've been fortunate enough to not live in the hood. So,
she got her car stolen, but got it back.
Yeah, it's definitely a story, but we picked him up. And yeah, I think it was great. I think just me, I just have this gentle giant sort of aura about me. And so me and Alex hit it off really well. He felt really comfortable.
I think I kind of set it up for her too, because I was like, you're not ready. And so knowing the competitive side in her,
but like, you're like what you were telling me
to like really be a true team player. And Alex,
which we did.
Yeah, we did pretty well. And that was only about a month.
It was probably less than, it was probably a couple weeks. And during that time, I had been applying for jobs. Even while I was out in Miami, I interviewed at an office in Miami, because at this point, again, you're not really thinking clearly. And now that I can look back and reflect, I made decisions really fast, but it was just kind of like, I don't know. It's just,
Well, even you applying to the job in Miami, when she told me that, I was like, well, I have been wanting to homeschool Alex. It's been in my journal, right, from a
That's
year
cool.
ago. And we're in August, and I'm like,
And we
if she
just got
gets the
back from
job,
Miami
I'm
too.
kind of down to move, right? And I'm just like, all these things are going in my head, but again, we're not thinking clearly. Plus, we're in like the honeymoon phase still, right? And so you ended up getting the call saying that you got the job
I got the job
in
and
August.
yeah, like
Also.
literally August, and we had all these things planned. We had an event we wanted to do, like when she
The
built it
women's
all.
event.
And yeah, I got the call, and I kind of knew I was gonna get it, but I was sort of hoping I wouldn't. It was this weird thing where you're like, you want the job, but you don't. You're just like, okay,
Like
if
when
I
you cold call, you're calling and you're hoping they don't answer, but part of you wants them to answer too.
right, because you want the lead, you want the money. So it was just like, well, I do need a job because it was like I was getting paid up to a certain time frame, and then once those payments stopped because I was
Yeah, I
laid
think it was
off.
until the end of August.
Yeah, I
So.
was just like, it was almost like desperation mode where it's like I have to keep the money coming, because even then I paused a lot on the real estate stuff because so much was going on, just in general, right? So I was like, I need the income. I've always we had just gone back from Miami. My dad lives out there. We loved it. And I was like, you know what? Like, and I even remember writing down I had calls with other people, and it was like kind of mixed. It was like, are you sure you want to do that? But then it was like, hey, just embrace it. You're going to learn so much.
Right.
So I wrote down pros and cons, and I was like, you know what is my gut telling me? And I feel like I'm a lot more self-aware now than I was then. But I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, we only live once. Like, I'm just gonna go for it, and we're gonna make this work. Because I even told you, I was like, I'm committed to you. We're gonna
Yeah, I
make
mean, she
this
wasn't
work.
gonna go alone, so we were both again committed.
But
To
we
each
were
other.
willing to make it work temporarily, where it was like, hey, I'll fly out every other weekend or whatever
We
to
quickly
see.
realized that wasn't gonna work.
Yeah, it's well, it's costly, and it's just really
It's just
stressful.
a lot too to have me figure it out in Long Beach by myself with Alex, and then like fly her out, or she flies out and then we fly out with Alex. It was just too much, and at the same time, like low key part of me was also like, okay, maybe this is an opportunity for me to get up and go. Like I had wrote down in my journal, I write down a lot of the stuff that I want and what I envision in the next 3 to 5 years, even 10 years at a time. And one of them was to homeschool Alex, right? Like that was one of my goals, and then be able to like work remotely from anywhere and just build a real estate team of good people that I can trust to like hold down the business in LA, right? Because most of my business is real estate related, and a lot of it is in LA still. So part of me was like, this is like my shot, right, at trying this out. And again, it's crunch time. Like the way the timelines work too is crazy because all this happened in August. So I had to make a decision. Like, am I going to put Alex in school or am I not? And so, luckily enough, I have a pretty good network of people. I talked to a couple moms who homeschool. They gave me the rundown on what to expect. And then, it's not what you expect.
It never is, and that's a whole other topic on change too.
Yes.
I'm sure for him, and I think we can even talk on the respect. Obviously, we're not him, but I'm like, as someone as a child who went through a lot of change. I moved a lot when I was a child. My parents split up, divorced, and I was literally like back and forth every weekend.
Say he's been handling pretty well. Like he's handled the whole change pretty well but I think a lot of it has to do with us.
Yeah.
I've always poured a lot of love into him. She knows the relationship and bond that I have. Sometimes it can get to you as a mom. You moms know what the hell I'm talking about. Like it just becomes overwhelming. Like having to care for another human being at all times. It's sometimes stressful, but then at the same time I tell myself maybe that's just stress that's caused by your own thoughts because the kid's fine. We want to thank you guys for watching and tuning into our channel every week and for just sharing all of your feedback for all of our episodes. If you guys can
subscribe, follow us on all the social channels. We are at Dope Synergies on IG, YouTube. Obviously, we can say the same spiel. It helps with the algorithm, but we really appreciate your support.
Right. So when we moved here, it was a bit of an adjustment, but we made sure that he had all his stuff, which was a lot of like his stuffed animals and all that stuff.
And our cat.
And our cat, which has been super, super supportive or an emotional support for Alex. But so that happened in September. I ended up homeschooling him. I also end up leaving my business in LA and moving out here while she's working. And so now the honeymoon phase has stopped, right? She's working full time. I'm at home with the kid all across the country, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Let's dissect that, because
Yeah.
I really want to for you, coming from LA and like meeting you, you're go go go, always driving to appointments, always doing this and that, like meetings. So talk about what that transition was like, and I felt, and I'll talk about my perspective too, but for you, um traveling across the country with the kid and then leaving your business, and like what that adjustment was like.
It was a big mind fuck for sure, because I had to release all control and just like have zero resistance in everything that I was doing, because I was really following my heart, right? And like she said, you only live once. So I'm very in love with this person. So the heart side of me is like, go with her, go explore life, move across the country. If you don't like it, you guys can move back.
Right.
Like, what's the worst
That
thing
was
that
always
can
the
happen?
option.
That was always our plan B, right? But the fact that I had met somebody who was just as down as I was and was like, let's go, like my heart was like telling me go do that. And I'm very intuitive with my heart and not so much with my mind, right? And many people can say, well, that's pretty stupid, right? Like, because the logical side of me, the mind was telling
both
me
of our minds were saying
like,
no.
who the fuck would do that? Why would you leave your business? You know, you have somewhat of a support with your kid too. Like, you're out and about showing houses, going to appointments, doing events. Like, you're the type that's go go go. How are you gonna leave all of this to go move across the country
leave
with
a
this
comfort
girl and leave your comfort zone at the end of the day, because that's all it is, right? It was a big transition for me, and I think it was tough. Like when we were in Little Havana, even though we created our own routine, like that's
it was another Airbnb that we moved to, and that
probably
was
one of my favorite ones though.
Yeah,
it was very close to downtown Miami, so it was a vibe. And Alex and I would go to the beach every day. So the cool thing was, and still is the fact that we work East Coast time, but you know, all my business is West Coast time. So my mornings were pretty open most of the time. They still are. And so at that time I was going with Alex, and I created a routine where we'd go to the beach or do some sort of active, you know, stuff. And then later in the day I'd have my virtual appointments. So I had to slowly transition into virtual. It also helped expand my mindset to delegate, you know, to delegate everything that I was doing physically. And there's nothing wrong with the people who are go 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 like that, because that was me for years. But it does, sometimes you do it because you're numbing or you don't want to face reality. And the point, and at the end of the day, I wasn't truly happy with who I was or where I was in my life. Which is why I think my soul just wanted a change. And that's why I chose to move here and chose to just like create this whole new life with her, despite of what my mind was telling me. I was just following my heart. But in that, you know, with the physical world, like you're feeling something, but you got to take action and make certain adjustments. So for me, it was delegating, knowing that everything was going to be fine and that I was going to be okay, and that I could rebuild that business that I had out here as well,
and still continue the business out there virtually,
and
which
now
you have
almost. Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been a year yet, but I'd say from the time we moved in September of last year to now, I mean, my business has probably like doubled.
Yeah. In terms of the opportunities and everything,
which is crazy. And I've been able to homeschool Alex, which has still been, I think, an adjustment for me. Luckily, like Florida doesn't have a crazy, you know, strict curriculum that you have to follow. So we're still adjusting to that. I mean, we have him in certain activities, we have him doing certain things that he likes to do, with the combination of also holding him accountable to like reading and writing and staying up to date with that and stuff, which I think I'm okay with, because I don't follow tradition, you know, traditional mindsets. And that goes for school system, work system, life system. Like the fact that we got up and left. I mean, most people are so comfortable in their life that they will never do something like that. They'll never experience something like this because they're fear of, you know, and comfortable. So same thing with the school system. Like I'm not going to follow a curriculum. I think what's helped me is what I'm going to show him, right? So like building love, confidence, making sure he's able to speak in public. We both work in sales and we understand how sales in my life has really helped me understand people, have high emotional intelligence, really be able to mirror and relate to people and connect with them and have empathy. And that has really helped me build relationships, which have then turned into opportunities, which has then turned into money. And many times
Right.
it's not even money that you need, it's really a network and relationships that you know that you
And I
create
think
with time.
pursuing your passions too. So I think
Yeah, at the end of the
we're
day,
catering
that's
it to
that's
him.
really what we're teaching him. So I was also thinking about that, right? Like when I left his dad and we got a divorce, I could have stayed there and just stayed stuck, like for years, which is what a lot of women do, unfortunately, because you're doing it for the kids. You're not doing it for the kids. You're doing it because you're very comfortable and the fear of the unknown. And I was there too. When I left, I was so fearful, like I didn't know what that next life would look like. And so I would rather stay in my shithole life, like toxic one, because at least I knew it was toxic
And it's
and
not
I
like you
was
had the support
comfortable.
system at home
Right.
either.
Right. So then being able to do that once has now helped me in being able to do it again. So like I've told her, if it doesn't work out here, we can move somewhere else. We can experience life out everywhere. I think at the end of the day, like home is where you're at and your family. And right now, I think we're in a transition where it took us a minute to adjust to Miami. I think now it's growing on us.
Yeah, I think we had the love-hate relationship where when we first, I think it was like the blissful, like, oh, we're in Miami, it's so great. And then shit got real where it was like, we were like in this period where we're like, oh, we miss LA. We flew out to, now we're flying more
We're flying
consistently.
out next
But
week.
but we were like really missing LA. And then I don't know, I think we needed to give ourselves grace too. And like sometimes making a huge change like this, it takes time. For some people, it takes them over a year, 2 years to get acclimated to a
I
new
mean, I had
city.
never moved outside of California.
Oh, me neither. I've always moved within California. I mean, the longest move was like from Northern California to LA. But even then, like it's still California. So
Right.
it's like allowing, I think just we need to give it some time. We need to give Florida time. But now we're like really like it feels like home
It does.
because of what we created. But I also wanted to go back for me too, because I'm the one that kind of, there was like some guilt with me in terms of like, hey, she moved her and her kid and her cat,
Oh my God.
her cat to Florida because
Right.
of me, right? I took this job thinking like, and it was always temporary, but I was like, hey, it's commission based. I can make a lot of money. It's a hot
Talk about change
market.
there too.
I went from working, first off, I went from working remote as a head of product.
Right.
So very comfortable. Talk about comfortable. I was in a very comfortable role
Very
with a
comfortable.
comfortable that or with a team and company I was with for almost over 6 years. So imagine that you see the same people interact, although there's a lot of changes that happen, but there was still a comfort with it
Right.
because I knew the systems and I got comfortable with it. And I think a lot of changes happened then with what the company was doing. And so going from that to in office, having to commute again, and then being more micromanaged and a whole different sector going from product to sales. Although I've been doing sales through real estate, so that's where I really honed in on those skills.
Mm-hmm.
But also being in office and being one of the oldest people in the office. I'm like, I was already 35, 36, and I'm working with kids in their 20s, like early to like late 20s. And I was just like, yeah, I don't fit in, but like, hey, I'm rolling with it. So that was another change I had to adjust on the work scope. That was really challenging. I think at first it was like, okay, cool, yeah, I'm just gonna get acclimated, and then I tried beginning my real estate stuff, and that
And
I
she
remember
really
being
held it
so.
down. But I will say that any corporate job, right, that you don't like, there's very few people that like their corporate job. But most corporate jobs, like they really make you feel like you're just another number, like you're just another person there who needs to perform.
Because it's all
And
metrics and KPIs and the way they track,
right,
and it's all like on the
especially
money,
in sales, and in
right?
which I get, like for a company you need that, but that's why like over 70% of people hate their job, because it's just very, you're trying to create culture with a whole bunch of people, different ages, ethnicities, age groups.
Especially this job, they were hiring new
people all
cohorts
the
of people
time.
every 2 weeks, like over
Right.
100 people. So you imagine that. How can you build
So
culture?
going from working remote to working at that job, I also saw a transition in her demeanor and like her body language and her just her aura. Like she was not the Claudia that was here in Miami fucking a year ago, you know, like
Yeah.
where we were at the beach chilling and having a great time. So it started to, I wouldn't say like it affected our relationship, but I started feeling disconnected from her because I
Because
would
I
see
was feeling
her. She was
disconnected.
all exactly. She was feeling disconnected from herself. So how could she connect with me? And so I knew something was off because even when she was still trying to hold it down, like do the 9 to 5, which is really like 12 hours because you have an hour of commute with traffic. Traffic here is the same as it is in
Yeah.
LA. And so you come home drained, and then she was still trying to do the podcast for her work, and then still trying to cater to me and deal with Alex and everything. And so it became a lot, you know, in a very short amount of time. And I was like this is not why we moved here.
Right.
You know, and I think I told you that. And this was probably around what, December?
Yeah, like the end of 2023. And I knew it too, and that was one of my fears when I moved here. I'm like, well, what if I'm away at work and it's like we have this disconnect where it's like we're
Mm-hmm.
not even connected. So that was something I was already aware of. But I was like, okay, I just hope, again, it goes
You're
back
so
to being
hopeful.
hopeful. And this also maybe in future episodes talk about how my demeanor too, I'm being hopeful and ignoring and actually
Yes.
not approaching the concerns head on versus like, oh, it'll work itself out. And sometimes when you leave it up to that, it doesn't always work out in your favor. So I was definitely over it. And I remember commuting, and that was a lot. I hate commuting. And that's one thing I learned. It's just takes away so much time. And especially when we moved a little bit further out from my office, I felt even more disconnected. But we tried, like, we would FaceTime and everything like
Or I
that.
would drive
But
out and meet her
there
for
was always a
lunch.
concern of like, I don't know how, if I did this for another 6 months, I don't know what our relationship will look like. When you're looking forward to the weekends, like as your
That's pretty whack.
vacation, it's
Yeah.
pretty whack. And I didn't like that. And again, there's nothing wrong. Some people enjoy that, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just, I
It's not
really
for us.
found out it's really not for me. And so all throughout that, although we did have like some good times, we went
We
out to
did
PR in
in
November of
November. Mm-hmm.
2023. We moved to our new place
When we
right
came
before the
back from
holidays.
PR.
So that there was some really, really nice moments. And I think we've also you connected more with my dad and my family too. So I think all in all, it was, it's been an adjustment. We're getting accustomed to it, and we're dealing with a whole nother change right now, a transition. But maybe we can cut it off for that for the next episode, just talking
Well,
about.
wait, you got to tell them though. So she ended up quitting her job.
Oh,
So we
that.
fucking moved across the country, ended up doing all
Oh,
this
let
shit.
me just not.
And yes,
I did
January
quit.
1st of 2024.
Yeah,
She
you're right.
quit.
I gotta frame it.
So
So, before I leave you guys dangling, so yes, I did quit because I was so over it. I was just like, you know
and she
what?
had my full support, and like she'll always have my full support. I think as yeah, as a significant other, like many times you think about yourself, and when somebody wants to quit or is not really passionate about what they're doing in life, yes, there's the financial aspect, which can, we'll talk about like in the next episode. But at the end of the day, like you need to believe in that person and understand that they're doing it for them. It ain't about you, right? It's
Right.
about them. And I think I just felt it. Like I felt for her, and I was like, well, if you're good, like for the next couple of months, why not just fucking quit? Like, what's the difference from quitting later than quitting now? Like, you're actually saving yourself more time and energy to focus on other things that can make you money, right? Because in my mind, I think with all the knowledge that we have nowadays, like it's crazy for you not to be able to make money on your own rather than work for a company, right? Like we have access to so many things. Doing the course, for example, really opened up my mindset to like, all you got to do is like have the knowledge that you have already and package it up, and you're able to sell it to somebody else who will benefit from that. And so there's different ways to generate money, but at the end of the day, you can't even do that when you don't have the support from the other person too. I think that's super important because that's what I would want for me, right? Like if it was the other way around.
And I think we learn to communicate and have those tough conversations, and then we'll talk about this in the next episode. Have it even tougher conversations, but that's something where having those tough conversations where you won't receive judgment, and I think that's the biggest thing with relationships. And we even before I quit my job, we went through our challenges too, of like change, of like.
Well, even actually just communication, for example, like I shut down when I don't
we had
communicate.
One of our first arguments or whatever.
Yeah, around the time when we went to the museum with Alex, and we tried to play it off cool with Alex, but kids know, right? Like they feed off your vibe. But yeah, I mean, she had her own like trauma that she had to deal with, and the way she said something to me made me just shut down, and that was like one of our first arguments, right? But it's not really an argument when the other person shuts down. You can't argue with the wall.
You really were a wall.
Yeah, but that comes from my own personal trauma and how I was raised. And my mom would shut down for days and just give me the silent treatment when things would go south, and so, or when things wouldn't go her way. So then I started self-analyzing, and I'm like, how come I have a hard time in relationships? I've never had a true relationship to begin with, and now that I want one and I'm like really committed to her, why am I struggling to open up and talk? And I just couldn't like let it out. My way to process, or like to even, I don't know, like process the feeling, was to shut down and not communicate anything at all.
And I come as being a people pleaser. I'm a people pleaser. So for me, it's like seeing somebody shut down. I'm like, are you okay? Are you okay? And that actually makes it worse.
That made it worse for me until I realized internally, like, okay, you need to self-analyze, because this isn't going to go anywhere if every time that there's a disagreement, or we don't see eye to eye on certain things, that I'm gonna shut down. Like, it's just not gonna work. So I really had to do some inner work to open up, and I'm still getting better at it.
I think we both also learned how to get used to, because I'm complete opposite when I'm upset.
She wants to talk.
I want to talk and I want attention. I'm like, just give me a hug if I'm upset, or but for her, she needs space, at least a little bit of space. I'm like, not 3 days of space, but at least a little bit. So I know I got more comfortable, and the trauma for me was being a people pleaser. So always asking, and I just want to fix things so we go back to normal, but that's not a normal way of of living. So being accustomed to allowing her that space, and then we reconvening and having those conversations. And those conversations, every time we've had that, because we've had other sort of moments as well, we always come closer together and we feel even more connected. So that sort of built the bridge, or the foundation to when I quit my job, and having those tough conversations, even tougher conversations in the future, what we went through recently. So we're going to leave it at that. But I think communication is so key, especially with change, is talking about your fears. Maybe one question before we hop off: would you do it again? And what would be sort of a suggestion for people going through change?
I would definitely do it again. I mean, we've even talked about, we're going to Costa Rica this year. Like, why not move out there? Because at this point, nothing is holding us back from staying here.
Except ourselves,
right? Like, at first it was her moving here because of work that we all decided to move here together. Come to find out, like, that wasn't really why she wanted to be here. But what we did get from this experience was the fact that we can get up and go. And I told her when we moved here, like, that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, is if I can get up and go and recreate home anywhere I go where I'm good with my family, like, I would do it over and over. So yes.
Yeah. Ditto. I would do it again. Even with the job, I think everything happens for a reason.
We wouldn't have made the move in such a short amount of time. That was the other thing that I learned too. Sometimes you think change is supposed to happen 6 months from now. Like we had said,
time
we're
is irrelevant.
To Miami in 6 months. We moved in 3 weeks.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times you put the limitations. So that's a really good point that I want to end with too, is we set limitations, even with goals, right? And I'm learning, it's like you set a stretch goal of like, okay, I want to accomplish $1 million, or I want to earn $1 million in 5 years. Well, what if you set it to 1 year? What would you do differently? And maybe you would apply those changes. So I think we put limit on ourselves when it comes to goals or taking action. It's like sometimes just do it and you'll figure it out and you'll learn a lot out of it. And what's the worst that can happen? So for us, it was like, hey, we can always move back. Yeah, the cost and
I
all, but
think
that
playing
that
worst
that
case
doesn't
scenario
matter.
is always good because then you in like mentioning what the worst case scenario is, when you vocalize that, you kind of come to terms with it and you come to peace. Like, okay, well, that's worst case. I mean, I do it with clients all the time. Hey, your offer got accepted. Best case scenario is you're going to be a homeowner in the next 30 days. Worst case is you don't. Like, you have to keep looking for other houses and you get rejected.
Right.
And so playing out worst case with best case, you always just come to peace with both and understand that it's never about the good or the bad scenario. It's always about the journey. So for me, I've been able to grow so much in this last, I don't even want to say year because it hasn't been a year, but she's seen how much I've grown on every aspect. And I'm very spiritual and I feel like I've tapped in even more so because I'm away from my family. I'm not as close to my family either, which we'll talk about in the other episode. So there's a lot of moving parts. And at the end of the day, you have to block out that noise and really follow your heart and your intuition and live. Like, don't just be a robot walking around the earth, like without any purpose and just being in your comfort zone. You don't really live. Like, there's this quote that says something like that, right? Where it's like, most people live till they're 75 or something like that, but they die at 30.
They die at 30 because they just
right.
It shows the comfort level. I mean, naturally the brain wants to be comfortable, so it's just expanding.
It's protecting you, right?
It's protecting you, so it's just expanding outside of that and exploring. Because it's like, what's the worst case? And I for me was like, I don't want to be on my deathbed being like living with regrets. And at least we can say, hey, shit, you remember that time we moved from LA to Miami? It's not going to be part of our journey and experience.
And sometimes I even drive down the freeway here, and I was just really grateful that, wow, like we really did this shit and we really moved across the country and we're really living what we wrote down, which, we talked about this in one of the other episodes about being good manifestors, just being clear with that. But we've done a lot of the things that we wrote down together that we continue to envision for each other. And, living by coastal is one of them. We're slowly moving towards that. We're flying out to LA next week and probably every other month, I think, for the rest of the year. And so technically we are living by coastal and we'll live in other areas as well as we buy more real estate in places where we want to visit, and just enjoy life together. So, yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. Next week's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about, financial challenges even, and just kind of more so adjusting to the spiritual journey. Mm-hmm. Yep. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys next week. See ya.